This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
It's showtime, folks. It's episode 38 of Game On here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'm Johnny Montalbano, joined by Hank Indictor. Hank, welcome. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Looking forward to the NFL playoffs. And I just have to say it again. Let's go, Big Blue.
That's right. It is postseason time in the National Football League. Yes, and you got both your Blues there with the Giants and the Rangers. That is a great thing as we are now entering the middle part of January. And yes, we are entering playoff football. Nothing like it. I think the two best weekends of the year in the National Football League are coming up with Super Wild Card Weekend this week, Divisional Weekend coming up next week. And we have a lot to get to over the course of the show, as we always do. Certainly a lot on the NFL. We've got to put a capper on the college football season with Georgia repeating as national champions in a blowout game over TCU. We're going to get to that. We've got even a little bit of baseball to get into as well, and some basketball as well to close it out. So we've got a little bit of everything covered here as we get it going here. And of course, folks, we want to hear from you. Plenty of ways to get aboard for you as well. You can follow us across our social media platforms. We are on Facebook and Twitter at GameOnETB. We're on Instagram at GameOn_ETB. Of course, our personal handles there on the bottom of your screen. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network. And we've even got our own website now at etbpodcast.com. So go check that out as well. And like I said, Hank, a lot to get to over the course of the show. We're going to put a capper on the college football season coming up. We're going to get through all the storylines week 18, get you set for Super Wild Card Weekend, and so much more. But Hank, we have to get the show going with what has been an unbelievable last week. Not only, really, not even just in football, but just in general, because Damar Hamlin, which we spoke about pretty much the entire episode last week. The updates on Hamlin this past week have been absolutely, hard. It's hard to even put into words. Just incredible, phenomenal, miracle, all that kind of stuff, whatever adjective you want to use. But we get news on Monday that he was released from that Cincinnati hospital and has made it back to Buffalo, where he's going to continue his recovery. He is now in stable condition. And less than a week after this just awful incident in Cincinnati, where we were praying for him, we was hoping that he was going to get out alive after the initial reports and stuff. And now the incredible work, not only by the Bills training staff, but also by the doctors there at that Cincinnati hospital to for Hamlin to make a great recovery, for Hamlin to be able to even watch the Bills' final game of the season on Sunday. It's definitely a different tone for us versus where we were last week. But Hank, this it's hard to even, again, like I'm saying, it's hard to put into words what this last week has been like. We almost didn't even do our football picks last week because we wanted to really make sure that Hamlin was going to be all right before anything even happened. And then we got good news originally on Thursday that his recovery was getting there. And as the days have gone on, we keep getting better and better news regarding Hamlin. And then the great news on Monday that he was released from the hospital, now back to Buffalo, where he's going to continue his rehab and recovery. But I mean, how do you put this into words now, a week after we were fearing for his life?
It's all really surreal. Like the whole week, I kept thinking about, is he going to be okay? Is he going to be okay? But then after all the reports about him making progress with his health, I'm like, hey, miracles do happen. And I got to say, how fitting was that you had Tage Thompson of the Buffalo Sabres, I know this isn't NFL related, get a hat trick and then win the game in overtime like not long after. And I don't know if you saw, but there was a lot of threes in that whole sequence. Like, isn't that like unreal? And then, of course, you had the opening kickoff touchdown in the Bills game. Like, unlike you, did not see it live because I was at my house. But like, when I saw the clip, I just got I got the whole chills watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we get to Thursday, and you hear when you hear the words, neurologically intact. I'm just trying to the forward phrase that we were talking about. Yeah. So substantial improvement and neurologically intact. That's was really like the first time that I was actually able to like smile and realize that, what, I think he's going to be okay. And we can actually proceed on to week 18, not knowing, and of course, knowing that, he still has a ways to go, but those were four of the best words you could have heard on Thursday from the doctors there in Cincinnati. And then we get, of course, the news on Monday that he was released from the hospital. But yeah, so a couple of more updates with that news on Monday. So he'll continue to undergo tests and be monitored back in Buffalo. The doctors did say Monday that Hamlin did not suffer any cervical spine injury, and he is currently able to walk with a normal gait as a product of how he remains neurologically intact. And a standard recovery from what Hamlin experienced is measured in weeks to months, though Hamlin has been a little bit ahead of that at each stage. And again, that just speaks to the great work that was done on the field and at the hospital with Hamlin. So then we get to Sunday, where really I think that was my big focus in the early window on Sunday, Hank, was with that Bills Patriots game, because I couldn't wait to see how how Buffalo Bills, how the stadium was going to react. And we saw how great the league was in responding to this. You had a lot of pray for Damar. Every team had Damar Hamlin strong, pray to Damar 3 shirts that they were wearing, and we all saw that the 3 on each team's field was going to be measured, was going to be in Buffalo Bills blue to support him. So the league and really the whole country really came together, because this galvanized the whole country. I mean, everybody was talking about it. You had regular news shows, you had any kind of show almost talking about this right at the start and all praying for him. So we got together as a nation for this, which was great. And then you go out there and you watch the game between the Bills and the Patriots, and you wanted to watch it because you wanted to see how the Bills were going to respond to this. And I got to tell you, I mean, and you could almost hear it in my voice, just the start of this game with Nyheim Hynes returning that opening kickoff 96 yards for a touchdown in that win against the Patriots. I mean, I have watched this highlight, Hank, this is not an exaggeration, almost 100 times since Sunday. And Jim Nantz and Tony Romo's call, the Bills radio call on this, every time I listened to it and watched it, it got to me. I mean, I was out watching the games at the early window on Sunday, and I had to hide my face because I welled up. I can't remember the last time that a sports moment really I got emotional over it. I mean, I don't really want to go to this extreme, but it had to be Mike Piazza's home run at Shea Stadium in the first game back in New York post 9/11, because it was just that special and that important. And I think it was that important to the league and to everybody, just to show that what the Bills did. And then not only was it that, but then Hynes does it a second time for 101 yards as well. And the Bills go on to win the game 35-23 against the Patriots. But just the whole story of the fact that Hamlin was getting better. He was watching the game from his hospital bed. The guys at the hospital were saying, the doctors were saying that he set off pretty much every alarm with how excited he was when this happened. I mean, how do you not? But I mean, it's. I think Nantz and Romo on the CBS broadcast said it best. It's storybook. It's fate. It really was an amazing thing to watch.
Yeah, it was absolutely stunning and unreal. And the Bills, man, I'll tell you, if there's one thing that came out of this for the Bills, look how much support they're going to get for the playoffs by by any fan of like a team that's like not a fan of those like not named the Bills. Like if your team's not in the playoffs, like I have a feeling there's a good chance you're going to be supporting the Bills, because think about what it would add to that whole story with regarding Hamlin surviving and then the Bills possibly winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that. And what was it also? You were talking about with Thompson there with the Sabres about wasn't it 3 years and 3 months since the Bills last ran a kickoff back for a touchdown?
Yes.
Again, just even a couple of days now after this has happened, I mean, it still gets to you. And again, if you don't react or if you don't have an emotion,
I'll tell you what it was. It was on January 3rd. He scored 3 goals. And again, it was all symbolism for Damar Hamlin.
Absolutely. And
it was in 3-on-3 overtime and for his 30th goal of the season.
I mean, what else can you say? Storybook and fate there. Storybook.
This could be one of the better Sabres teams in a while.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing up there is pretty special too with the Sabres. And now with the Bills, as they get ready for the postseason, they will take on the Dolphins as part of their Super Wildcard Weekend game this weekend. And we're going to get to obviously the Super Wildcard Weekend and pick those games later on in the week. But as far as this goes, it just showed you that that there really is something special here with this team. I mean, you even saw McDermott, the head coach. You saw Josh Allen reacting to this too, because I mean, it touched everybody. And that kickoff return, again, unreal. It's like Nance said, it's storybook. Like Romo said, it's fate. So just an absolutely amazing thing for the Buffalo Bills. And now they get ready for the postseason. And they're, I still believe, going to be a very, very dangerous team in the playoffs. And now you are home to take on a Miami Dolphins team that just is not the same without Tua. And I know that's going to be one of the storylines this week is Tua going to be ready to come back this week? And it doesn't look like it as of now. He still hasn't really even cleared concussion protocol, so I don't think it's going to be like that. But yeah, just a very, very special moment there in Buffalo and for the league, which was basically, on pins and needles every day last week, waiting for updates on Hamlin. And the news each day got a little bit better until we got to Thursday, when we got that first great step. And every day just continued to get better and better. And then we get the news on Monday that he got released. Now he's obviously still got ways to go, but again, just what could have been. And again, this is where, this is why you train for this in the preseason. I brought up on the show last week that NFL teams, they go through this in preseason and prepare in case situations like this happen. I mean, I don't even know you can be braced for even something like this, but they do prepare for emergency type situations. And that's what we saw here. And the training staff of the Bills, the doctors and everything else, I mean, all heroes for Damar Hamlin. And then the Bills go out there and put an unbelievable game together against the Patriots. Got a little interesting there for a while, but ultimately at the end of the day, they win 35-23 against New England, and they get themselves set for the playoffs. So obviously that's been the big deal. There's been a lot of other storylines though with the NFL, Hank. We saw on Saturday that the Chiefs clinched the AFC #1 seed and a first round bye with their win over the Raiders. And that ultimately means that the road to the playoffs now is going to roll through Kansas City, and Chiefs are going to, again, Patrick Mahomes, got to go through him. And this Chiefs team is still a very, very dangerous team to watch as we get ourselves going here in the postseason.
Oh, yeah, the Chiefs are definitely – listen, I've been very high on the Bills, but that's not to say I don't think the Chiefs are a team that could necessarily – that are a threat, because, I mean, look, they're the #1 seed for a reason. Patrick Mahomes, people thought the Chiefs were going to decline a bit with the loss of some of their receivers, but no, you could argue this is probably one of Patrick Mahomes' better seasons. And they end up beating the Raiders, who very well might be Patrick Mahomes' punching bag if you look at his track record against them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's definitely going to be an AFC championship matchup to watch. Should it be the Bills against the Chiefs, but would not surprise me in the least.
Yeah, it looks like we're trending towards that, but I think Cincinnati's also going to, they're going to make this interesting too.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I should have mentioned the Bengals. Tom, if you're watching this, Albano, that is, I should not have disrespected the Bengals.
No, that's quite all right. And they're going to play the Ravens again, second straight week coming up this weekend as well. And the big deal with that game is going to be, is Lamar Jackson going to be back for Baltimore? Because that team, let's be honest, I mean, that team's just not the same. I mean, they didn't even have Tyler Huntley back. It was Anthony Brown starting, and some of his throws on Sunday were just hard to watch in that one. But yeah, so Kansas City gets it done again. I agree with you. I thought there was going to be a little bit of a step back, especially when we were talking about when the season started, how potentially dangerous that AFC West was going to be. But it really ended up being the two teams that I thought at least was going to be. It was going to be the Chiefs and the Chargers. But Kansas City, it's going to roll through them once again. Another one of my favorite stories, though, from this weekend, Hank, was the Jacksonville Jaguars winning the AFC South. So they go back to the playoffs for the first time since 2017. And I know you've been high on the Jaguars all season. I thought that there was definitely some potential there with, them bringing in some guys, drafting Trayvon Walker, bringing in Christian Kirk, Doug Peterson as the head coach, which I think has been one of two big reasons why the Jaguars have been able to turn this around so quick. Number one, the head coach, Doug Peterson. Number two, Trevor Lawrence's teammate, Travis Etienne from Clemson, being back there this season, I think helped out a lot as well. If you remember last year, Etienne got hurt in the first preseason game and ended up missing the entire season. And we've seen that now in the league where you actually do have your college teammates with you, and it does help you. We see that in Cincinnati with Burrow and Chase. We see that here. So the Jaguars with an amazing turnaround, and also at the same time, the Tennessee Titans was just an unbelievable drop-off. 8 straight losses. Now, this one, though, I don't think you really could blame Tennessee for, because Trevor Lawrence didn't really play that great. And at the end of the day, Tennessee in this was really put in an impossible spot, in my opinion, having to start Josh Dobbs in week 18 in a game that's for the division. They didn't do that bad, but it just came down to a couple of miscues at the end there. But Mike Vrabel, I think, considering the talent level that they've had, they do have obviously Derrick Henry. They do have a couple of receivers in Treylon Burks and Robert Woods, but that Tennessee team's not good. And maybe taking advantage of a weak division helped them. But at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to watch there in Tennessee what happens. Now, we've seen them already fire a couple of coordinators. I wonder if Mike Vrabel's going to be on the hot seat here. If he hasn't been fired yet, he could be up there really soon. I know you were talking about it too in a previous show, that I don't think it matters who it is. You really can't survive 7 or 8 straight losses, right?
No, and I'm surprised he hasn't really gotten the axe yet, but I feel like that's news that could probably happen, say, later on in the day. Possibly.
Yeah. It's tough because he's a good coach.
He's a good coach.
That's the thing, he's a good coach, but he just doesn't have a lot of talent. And
there's a reason why and that's why they fired the GM.
Yeah, and that was during the season after the Eagles game, and they just have never recovered from that since. And we saw that offensive coordinator who was involved in that incident get let go. But I wouldn't fire Vrabel. I'd still give him one more shot. But you've got to improve that team. That offensive line's not good. Ryan Tannehill's all right as long as he has good protection, but he doesn't really have that. I actually think it was actually kind of amazing that Tennessee even got to this point, considering where they were.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And listen, one of the reasons that I've been high on the Jaguars, I think you know what I'm going to say. Trevor Lawrence is him.
And absolutely. And that's one of the games I can't wait for on Saturday night, with the Chargers going down there to play in Jacksonville.
That is going to be a great matchup. And it's crazy. They haven't had a primetime game since the early 2000s?
In the playoffs?
No, like in general, they have not had a primetime game in quite a while.
Well, I mean, I know they had one last week, but if you want to talk about it in a true prime spot, yeah, this would be it. But I
No, but
can't
I
wait
mean,
for
up
that.
until last week, that they haven't
Yeah,
really.
I think that's been it, because even when they were in the playoffs a couple of years ago, back in 2017, and they played the Patriots, that was an afternoon game
It
in the
was.
AFC Championship, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was a day game because I remember the Eagles were the night game, and I believe this is only their 4th AFC South division title too since they came into the league. They won in, I want to say Coughlin won in 98 and 99 for them, and then 2017 happened, almost got to the Super Bowl, and now here they are.
It's incredible because I think there was, I'm trying to remember correctly, if you take out that one season back in 2017 when they won 10 plus games, every year before and since then in that stretch, they lost 10 games. And then they had that one year where they won north of 10, and then they get to this spot where they end up winning the AFC South. And I'll tell you what, I mean, I know we're going to talk about this a lot more later in the week when we do our picks, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least way if Jacksonville beats the Chargers on Saturday night. Because to me, Jacksonville's got the head coaching advantage, that's for sure.
Well, here's a list of a lot of the streaks that the Jaguars broke, and this is a credit to Jaguar Gator 9 for tweeting this out. Obviously, you could tell I'm a big fan of that guy's work on YouTube.
Yep.
Have not won a game in Tennessee since 2013. 20 straight losses against the NFC. No primetime road wins since 2000. That was the one I was thinking of.
Okay.
9 straight losses against the Texans. Haven't swept the Titans since 2005. Those are all streaks that the Jaguars broke this year.
Yeah, I remember that Texans one. The Texans seem to always have their number despite their mess. But yeah, and again, you know, Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence, I think anything's possible with them. And now they host the Chargers, and we'll find out what happens there on Saturday night. But a very cool sight there to see. And then that fumble recovery by the Jaguars to ultimately get it done. And so they are in the playoffs, and they will be hosting the Chargers on Super Wild Card Saturday night there in Jacksonville. Well, other things to also talk about too. How about the Seattle Seahawks getting that final playoff spot in the NFC as they were bracing for the end of the Lions and Packers game? Seattle gets the overtime win against the Rams, and that one was crazy too because you had a missed field goal in overtime, and then Baker Mayfield throws an interception, which allows Geno Smith to go down and help get the Seahawks into field goal range, and then they ultimately get the job done. Look, I'll say this. I mean, I know what Geno Smith's been through. You cannot help but like what he's been able to do this year. And there's Kevin Kugler, Mark Sanchez, and Laura Oakman, I think, have had the Seahawks more than any other team this year. And I think Laura even had said it on one of her tweets that they've covered them more than anybody else, and they've gotten to know Geno and stuff. And Geno comes across as a very likable person when you look at what he's had to go through these last several years, being out of the league for so long, and basically, you know, comeback player of the year, I think is a pure lock for him. But to take that Seahawks team, which I don't know how you thought they were going to the season, but I thought they were at max a 5-win team, and look what they've been able to do this year. And now they are going to be in the playoffs, which I don't think any of us can even imagine is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, no, that's definitely crazy. I was thinking around 4 or 5 wins. And granted, obviously, they got help in getting into the playoffs. And look, I thought they were going to lose that game to the Rams too, but they somehow found a way, especially after their kicker hit the post in overtime. But then they redeemed themselves when Baker threw what pretty much looked like an arm punt into one of the Seahawks. I knew
He's the younger arm punt. That's what it was. Yes.
No, Joe Flacco will always be the true master.
Well, he's the arm punt, but I'm saying, but you know, you need a younger one too.
But I guess Baker might be the younger arm punt. And the arm punt pretty much saved the Seahawks.
Yeah, you know, the Seahawks have had guys, and that's what was so weird about when they made that trade, and then when they traded away Russell Wilson, they brought in Noah Fant, they brought in who was it? Drew Lock to battle a QB with Geno. And you were wondering, all right, are they rebuilding or are they kind of restructuring? Because I didn't believe they were rebuilding because they still had some guys in that team. You know, they had Lockett, they had Kenneth Walker, who had a great year as the running back. They had some other guys too. And it was like, you know, all right, so Seattle's got some guys here. I mean, let's see what they could do. You know, Pete Carroll riding out the string here. And, you know, you almost can say Pete Carroll could get some coach of the year consideration too in Seattle because nobody expected him to be like this. And then Geno, who hasn't really played a game in a few years, really hasn't been a starter like for this amount of time and what seems like forever. And they're able to go down and you know, win this game against the Rams and then have to brace for what happens in the night game, which we'll get to in just a second. I mean, it is one of the cooler stories of the year, Seattle, and they're a very likable squad. You know, you watch enough Seahawks games and you see Geno Smith, who's been interviewed a lot this year. You know, you get to feel very, very happy for him. You know, I remember Geno was on the Giants for like a cup of coffee, but I never had any ill will towards him. I mean, it wasn't his fault for what happened, but it was cool to get
No, that
another
was
shot.
the coach that we'll politely refer to as the guy who came after Tom Coughlin.
Yes, well, absolutely. Another guy who shall not be mentioned. But it was cool to see him go to Seattle, get a shot, and you know, get the job done there. And I don't know what kind of shot I'd give them against the 49ers, but to get into the playoffs is a very, very cool thing for Seattle.
They may have a shot only because, you know, it is hard for a team to win against the same opponent 3 times. However, I'm not sold on Seattle being that team. I think they pretty much limped into the playoffs and they got very, very lucky. So I don't know.
It looked like they were running on empty for until the last couple of weeks. And then their defense actually did step up in a way against the Jets. And then their defense did, for the most part, play well against the Rams and get them into this spot. And now they'll take on a 49ers team which just seems absolutely loaded this weekend. But nevertheless, I mean, it's a win-win spot for Seattle because just to get into this spot is just an amazing thing. And what also helped them, though, too, was this, on Sunday Night Football, the final game of the season, game number 271, you have the Lions who beat the Packers. And I just didn't see this coming because I thought Green Bay was playing so well. But, you know, Detroit, I mean, not enough great things can be said about what Dan Campbell's done. And he has definitely turned the culture around there in Detroit. And you know what? They may not be playing a playoff game, but I'll tell you what they were able to do this season, going from 1-6 to finishing over 500 and playing spoiler at the end of the day to knock the Packers out. Again, just another great coaching job, this time by Dan Campbell.
Yep. I definitely, you know, it's funny. You know what I would equate the Lions end of the season to?
No.
Patrick and SpongeBob reaching Shell City, like during the SpongeBob movie, but then they didn't know that they got there. And, you know, it looked like they were dying, but then they thought they failed because they didn't make the playoffs. But then the Lions had a change in culture with their winning season. And then not only that, but they swept the Packers. And Johnny, I don't know I'm going to look this up when the Lions last swept the Packers, but it had to have been sometime in the 90s when they had a Barry Switzer. Jerry Sanders. Why did I say Switzer? Come on.
I was going to say, I would imagine, if I had to take a guess, I would say it would be pre-Brett Favre.
That probably would have been the early 90s. And
I'll tell you what's really crazy, talking about talking about this and then talking about the NFL postseason. You have the Lions and the Seahawks and the Steelers there in the AFC are two teams that, if they were in the playoffs, I think would actually make a lot of noise. And they're on the outside looking in. But I mean, again, what they were able to do.
It was 1991, which was also the last time the Lions won a playoff game.
Yes. And look, they're only going to get better, I believe. I think the thing with the Lions that I think about right away is, if Jared Goff comes back under center next year, can he duplicate the kind of year that he had this year? Because he had a great year. And, you know, they've got guys. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I take that back. They swept in 2018.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I forgot about that.
So post Brett Favre, but
there was the years where there was one year where they swept where Aaron Rodgers wasn't healthy, and then 2018 the Packers just weren't great.
Was that they were 8-8 that year, if I remember right?
Something like that. They were pretty mediocre.
Okay, but I would say though that if I look at the Lions going into next season, I mean they've got the wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've got Jameson Williams from Alabama, who you remember didn't make a season debut until later on in the season. They've got Williams, the running back. They've got Swift. The thing with they've got DJ Chark, but he's going to be a free agent, and I'll tell you right now, he's not a name that's well known. But I would take him on the Giants next year. I've said that. So 2018, 2019 was 6-9-1. Okay, so that I do remember that now. That was an off year for Green Bay. Absolutely. Sometimes they all blend in together. But you look at Detroit, I think they can make some noise here too next year. Obviously, they've got Hutchinson, who had a great year this year as well. So the Lions have the pieces, and Dan Campbell has given that team a boost, and you could tell they love playing for the guy, and they go from 1-6 to 9-8. Which is just amazing. And the thing is, too, which is crazy, Hank, is if they were able to – they had some big leads in some of these games that they were not able to hold on. Let's say they hold on to one or two of those, the Lions would be in. It was just that crazy. And then Green Bay – now, as far as Green Bay goes, just to get into this spot in Week 18 was incredible considering the start they had. Christian Watson did definitely provide them a big spark second half of the year. But all the talk now about Green Bay going to – this offseason is going to be, is this the end for Aaron Rodgers? It seems to be the question we've been having the last 2 or 3 years, but the way that he left the field there on Sunday night and his post-game press conference makes you really wonder, is this really the end for Aaron Rodgers? I think that the thing you have to wonder is, could Aaron Rodgers, and I know this was a question that he was asked on the post-game Sunday night, could he walk away from that contract? I really think he could, but ultimately at the end of the day, is Aaron Rodgers going to be there in Green Bay? That's what will be the biggest question for them.
I mean, I would never say never. I thought he was going to be gone after last year, but then again, does that necessarily mean I'd put it past him to walk away? No.
I mean, he still shows he can play. I mean, he had some the last few years have been absolutely remarkable what he's done. But you just wonder, I mean, can he keep it going? I mean, that's the thing. That's going to be the $100 million question, because he's still got 2 years and $50 million on that deal. Can he walk away from all that? And I think he could. I mean, he's got stuff. I mean, he's got enough money. He's got gigs where he can do stuff. I mean, he's fine. He basically could be, with McAfee every week. I mean, he's got it made. So the question's going to be, though, will Rodgers return to Green Bay? Or is Green Bay going to have to go in another direction? And, Jordan Love, or if Rodgers decides not to come back, do they go after a QB, whether it's in the draft, or do they go after one of the guys that are going to be in free agency this year? They're going to be a team to watch in that spot too. But because of the Packers loss at the end of the day, that ended up getting Seattle in to the playoffs. And again, just a cool sight there for Seattle to go from them. So that brings us to Super Wildcard Weekend. 2 games Saturday, 3 games Sunday, 1 game Monday. Seahawks, 49ers, Chargers, and Jaguars on Saturday. Dolphins and Bills at 1 p.m. Sunday. Our Giants and Vikings at 4:40. Ravens and Bengals once again on Sunday night. And then the Monday night game will be the Cowboys and the Buccaneers. And Hank, a lot of games with rematches from this past season happening on Super Wildcard Weekend. Obviously, I'm going to be a little biased in saying this. I'm so looking forward to the Giants and the Vikings game.
Oh, me too.
It is a rematch of a couple of weeks ago where you can almost make the case the Giants could have won that game. The Vikings, to me, I think there's some concern. I think all the pressure's on them. But when you look at the Giants here in this matchup, Hank, this is also what speaks to how great Brian Dable's been this year. Last week against the Eagles, they're basically playing second and third string guys during that game, and they still made it a game at the end. And the Eagles did win, but the Eagles didn't really look that sharp, and the Giants made it a game. And I got to tell you, to me, there's absolutely no pressure on the Giants playing the Vikings on Sunday. All the pressure to me is on Minnesota, because They easily won 13 games. I shouldn't say easily won, but they won 13 games in the NFC North. And
13
everything
games
that's
while being in the red.
right, exactly. They finished in the red this season, and all the talk with them is going to be, their minus point differential, how they win close games, how they get blown out in others, and ultimately, end of the day, Kirk Cousins always is the topic of conversation there. And this is technically going to be kind of a primetime game because in the second half to fourth quarter of this game, it will be in prime time. It'll be in that 7 p.m. Eastern time spot. So we'll be talking about early prime time. So we will be when we do these picks on later on this week, that question, that Kirk Cousins checklist is going to have to be asked and activated for this game. And again, the Giants to me are playing with absolutely no pressure because they have been one of the most disrespected teams this season. And what Brian Dable's able to do with less, he's probably done more with less than I would say. When I look at all these matchups, I think he's done more with less than almost any other team you could say in this matchup. I mean, you want to say maybe Seattle? I would give you maybe Seattle, but Giants have done more with less than any other team this year.
Yeah, that I would pretty much tend to agree with, and that's not me trying to be biased, but Seattle, here's the thing with Seattle. At least Seattle has a bit of a receiving core.
Yes.
One of our biggest acquisitions was getting Isaiah Hodgins, which was a great one.
Yeah.
Make no mistake. I thought that was definitely one of the more underrated moves that Shane made, and I think he's definitely earned a spot next year, and just wait till you get another guy that could probably complement him on that receiving core. So I think that's really the big difference that I would say between the Giants and the Seahawks. But also, let's also not forget, while the Giants secondary may be paper thin, their pass rush is going to be insane the next few years. You're going to have, I cannot wait to see years of Ojulari and Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence too.
Yeah. And Hank, this is not a far reach to say this. I look at these 12 teams this weekend. The Giants might be the least talented of those 12 teams, but they have one of the better coaches and the better systems of the 12 teams that are playing this weekend. I think the only other team right now I could say, given all their injury problems and everything, would see maybe Baltimore, but I'm looking forward to that. Seahawks 49ers, I don't think NFC West matchup there. The Cowboys-Bucks game on Monday night, considering how bad Dallas has looked these last couple of weeks, how off Dak Prescott's been, and them having to go to Tampa and, maybe playoff Brady gets activated here, that could be a spot where we might see the Bucks winning against the Cowboys. But otherwise, at the end of the day, nevertheless, it's playoff football, and it's going to be absolutely exciting. And I'm looking forward to it. Of course, we will do a Football Friday this week, as we do have 6 games and preview and break down every matchup. And it should be exciting. Bless you, sir.
Sorry.
It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to getting no sleep this weekend. But then again, this is one of the 2 best weekends of the football season. Of course, after this, you do have the divisional round, and that is also exciting. And then we come down the stretch with just a few games left as we come down the stretch here of this NFL season. So we will see what happens here in the National Football League. And again, our Football Friday picks will drop later on this week as we will preview and predict Super Wildcard Weekend. Well, Hank, after the regular season in the NFL, of course, comes the infamous Black Monday, and it's already happened to a couple of teams this year, and that's also with a couple of storylines that we had with the NFL as well. How about right out of the gate here, even before you get to Monday, that the Houston Texans fired Lovie Smith after 1 year. Second straight season that the Texans fired their head coach after 1 season. We saw it with David Culley back in the 2021 campaign, and Lovie Smith. And I love this. Look, the Texans had nothing really to play for this year. They were playing for the number 1 overall pick, but they actually had shown these past couple of weeks that they were improving. And I guess at the end of the day, you know what? Lovie Smith's a Bear. He's a Chicago Bear because he helped them. He is a true Chicago Bear because he helped Chicago get into the number 1 spot. And something like we talked about last week on the Football Friday pick segment was Lovie Smith was going to coach his team out of the number 1 spot. And Turns out he did, but it also has to speak to the fact that the Indianapolis Colts just absolutely stink. I mean, the Texans jumped out to an early lead. I know they came back, Indy did, but again, Houston has nothing to play for in this spot. Before I get to anything else, I mean, what did you think about Lovie?
I feel like he was really a stopgap coach because the Texans are obviously in a rebuild mode, and I don't really think it was necessarily his fault that the team was that bad. They had a bad roster, so I think he knew what he was getting into, but to scapegoat him after 1 year the way you did with David Culley, I mean, it's kind of brutal. Like, I think a lot of what happened was a lot of stuff that was out of Lovie Smith's control, but I like his attitude for playing to win the game. Like, for those of you who don't know, I know there are a lot of people that subscribe to the theory that tanking is good for teams in the long run. I don't necessarily feel that way. I always want to root for my team to win. And if you're like, and the way that these players are playing, like, they're not paid to lose these games. So I kind of like what Lovie Smith did at the end of that game to help the Texans win. But at the same time, should he have gotten fired? Not necessarily. I mean, I think the other guy who got fired that we're going to talk about, that's a guy who really should deserve to lose his job.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% about Lovie Smith. I mean, that Texans team is just awful. I mean, I Dameon Pierce, their running back, is good, but I mean, they've got nothing else on that team. I mean, they've got no quarterback. They've got not much in receiving core. I mean, Brandon Cooks is asking to basically be let go because he doesn't want to be part of a rebuild. What that win, though, did do, coupled with the Vikings beating the Bears, was giving the Bears the number 1 overall pick in the upcoming 2023 draft. And I guess what that will create is, what do the Bears do with that pick? Because to me, I think they're going to stay with Justin Fields. I mean, I know that there's Bryce Young, there's CJ Stroud, there's Will Levis, the quarterback out of Kentucky, there's Stetson Bennett, who we're going to get to in just a moment too. I know there are some quarterbacks in this draft, but to me, Justin Fields has showed this year that he can play. And, he was playing through a shoulder issue. Then he didn't play in week 18 because of a hip injury, although I think that could have been also because they were tanking and the Texans were not tanking. I think the Bears surely were going to Nathan Peterman, and then we even saw a Tim Boyle sighting in Chicago. And, of course, in his first possession, he throws an interception. But what that does now, so do the Bears take a quarterback at number 1? Do they take a defensive player at number 1? I mean, we saw that Carter, the defensive lineman from those champion Georgia Bulldogs, Jalen Carter, is going to declare for a draft, and you saw experts like Mel Kiper saying that he's probably going to be the first defensive player taken. Or do the Bears trade that? Or do the Bears trade that pick? Does some other team now trade up to get ahead of the Texans for the number 1 overall pick and grab a QB? So it actually does create a couple of storylines and a couple of question marks here, because we all know that the Texans are going to draft a QB at number 2, but now the Bears do have some leverage there at 1. They could go with a QB and trade Fields, which I think would be absolutely ridiculous. They could go with a defensive player, or there could be another team that trades up, offers a significant haul, and they go up there and get a QB at number 1.
If you're going to trade Justin Fields, then you know what? We won that trade. You know what I'm talking about.
I do, yeah.
It doesn't matter that we took Kadarius Toney, and I think we won that. I think Joe Shane very well may have fixed that part of the trade, but you trade Justin Fields, hey, more power to you. Just know you're going to regret it when he goes to a team that is in better shape and can actually provide you with a good supporting cast, and he ends up becoming really good.
Yeah.
Because why am I saying this? I really think Justin Fields has the talent, and I think the reason I think the reason the Bears struggled was not because of him at all. I think the Bears are just a poorly built team, and if they trade him,
yeah.
That guy could be you very well could have had the better quarterback that you've had since Jay Cutler. Say what you want about Jay Cutler, but he still was actually one of the better quarterbacks that they've had, and they've had too many, and they could very well be wasting talent.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things you can question with the Bears, but this Justin Fields thing is not. I mean, the trade for Chase Claypool made absolutely no sense, and now that first pick that first pick in the second round is going to the Steelers in that one. So that one made no sense as well.
Why would you trade valuable draft capital if you're rebuilt? That defeats the purpose of a rebuild.
And not play to really Fields' kind of game. That's why that made no sense as well. But yeah, so that's what will be a thing to watch here as we come up on the draft is what do the Bears now do with the number 1 overall pick. So we'll watch that. But just going back to the coaching wire here, Kliff Kingsbury, I think we knew this was inevitable. We had been talking about it for the longest time. This Cardinals team has been an absolute free fall. I know they won 10 games last year, but this free fall really started at the end of last year too, because they had fallen down the stretch at the end of last year. And then this year, they just haven't been able to get it done, even with DeAndre Hopkins. And I know that Kyler did get hurt, and we don't know if he's even going to be ready for the start of next season, which is why I think you're going to be looking at a stopgap kind of guy there. Could be, the likes of Baker Mayfield. If you want to try and trade away Jacoby Brissett, try and trade for Jacoby Brissett, those kind of guys are going to be there, not like the David Blows or the Colt McCoys of the world there too, because we don't know if Justin Fields, I've been talking about Fields all day here, if Kyler Murray is going to be ready for the start of the season next year there in Arizona. So even with some guys there, this has been a downfall for Kingsbury and the Cardinals. And they finished 4-13. Kingsbury in 4 seasons as Arizona head coach, 28-37-1 with 1 playoff appearance, Hank.
Yep, that is underachieving to the max, arguably.
Yeah. Pretty much there. And I know their GM had also stepped aside there too in Arizona. So
I don't know he's coming back either.
Yeah, I don't know what direction Arizona's going to go in with we've heard of a couple of other guys here to watch here too. We don't know as of Tuesday what the situation is going to be with Sean McVay there with the Rams. But we've heard maybe some other guys too. Mike Vrabel, I still think he's going to be safe, but Mike Vrabel could be a guy, again, you lose 8 in a row. I don't care how good you are. Not a lot of guys did that. And also one thing to watch here with Kingsbury too, he just recently signed an extension. I think it was at the end of last year that was running through 2027. So I don't know. Hank, do you want to use your favorite phrase?
Severance.
That's it.
Severance pay.
Severance
That's a lot of severance. So
it's a lot.
So at the end of the day, do I really feel bad for Kliff Kingsbury? Nope. I mean, granted, it's not as big as Matt Rule's severance pay, but yeah, he at the end of the day, I think Kliff Kingsbury actually won. And not to mention, he's probably going to get another coordinator job somewhere, or I can see another college team hiring him as a head coach. But
yeah, Hank, you read my mind there. I think he could go back to college. I really do, or he does land as a coordinator. But I think going back to college is definitely in play for Kingsbury.
Once again, did he really lose? I don't think so.
So just think about this, and this was Adam Schefter tweeted this out on Monday morning. So coaches since 2000, jumping from college to the NFL. These are head coaches and their records. Urban Meyer, 2-11. Need I say more? Matt Rule, 11-27. Need I say more? Kliff Kingsbury, we talked about 28-37-1. Bill O'Brien, 52-48. All right, not bad. Chip Kelly, 26-21. Doug Marrone, 15-17. Greg Schiano, 11-21. Jim Harbaugh, 44-19-1. And again, I will keep bringing this up. I still think there's a possibility that Jim Harbaugh is coming back to the NFL next year. I really do. And people are like, oh, well, why would he want to leave Michigan? Well, folks, I'll tell you right now. You pay him the big bucks, he will leave. If you give it, he will take it. They will come.
Here's why I'm starting to agree with you, too. Did you see one of his press conferences? He didn't exactly commit to coming back to Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does that necessarily mean he's a goner for sure? No, but if he didn't commit it, that means he's leaving the door open for a possibility. And I wouldn't be surprised if, say, the Broncos or the Panthers, well, assume the Panthers want to keep or want to let Steve Wilkes go, which I think might be a bit of a mistake considering how much better they were with him. But that's another. I would say the Colts are another team that could probably use him too. Although then again, I don't know who really wants to work for Irsay at this point with the way he wrecked that team.
If they pay him a ton of money,
true. Just be careful of the possible severance. I was going to use that line again.
Well, let's also remember too, one thing about Michigan too, they are right now, they received notice of allegations from the NCAA. This story came out last week from The Athletic that they received draft allegations from the NCAA regarding their football program. So if Harbaugh gets out of there, maybe he sees that something might be happening. That might be something to watch here too. But
that sounds like Pete Carroll.
Yeah, maybe. And Pete Carroll, by the way,
Pete Carroll.
And by the way, Pete Carroll, one of those guys that also went from college to pro and both had successful careers in both. But just finishing up this list, Bobby Petrino was 3-10, Nick Saban was 15-17, Steve Spurrier 12-20, and Butch Davis 24-35. So those are all the coaches that have jumped from college to the NFL.
Actually, there is one disaster that you forgot to mention, but we'll pretend that his tenure in the NFL never happened. Okay. Or at least Jaguars fans are going to want to pretend that.
Oh, no, I mentioned it at the top. I know who you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I thought
No, that's okay. You're good.
I think I heard you. But either way, I think a lot of people want to block his time in the NFL out of their memory bank.
Well, the best thing that happened is that he went back to the Fox high noon kickoff, big noon kickoff broadcast, the pregame, and that helped out too. So that's what's happened so far in the NFL this week. And again, we got wild card weekend coming up on this coming Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Yeah, Kingsbury is 4 years and $7.5 million each. So I still think he's going to land somewhere. You know, these guys always do. It's like these quarterbacks that we talk about. You know, when you think about these guys that don't have a future, they're going to end up at some team, and especially with the quarterback position next year. I mean, look at how many different QBs played this year because of injuries or whatnot. I mean, you were talking about guys that, I mean, when you heard it, I mean, you scratched your head in disbelief over it. And if Geno Smith could get another opportunity to start and have the kind of year that he did, there are going to be guys that are going to play. Like I said, you know, like Baker Mayfield's going to land with somebody next year. Arizona, maybe he stays out there in LA. Maybe the Jets take a run at him, because that's going to be something to watch there too, over there with the Jets after their kind of year where they do have the pieces to be good, but totally faded down the stretch, not scoring a touchdown in their last 4 games. We will see what happens. So a bunch of things coming up. I mean, of course, you're going to hear a lot of rumors this week about NFL coaches and stuff. I'm sure there's going to be stuff breaking after our show airs. So stay tuned for all that stuff. There's going to be a lot more where that came from. But Hank, speaking of college football, while we brought it up there briefly, we have to, I don't know how we're going to talk about it, but we have to talk about Monday night's national championship game between TCU and Georgia, where the Bulldogs just absolutely bulldozed their way to a 65-7 victory over TCU and the Horned Frogs to win their second straight college football playoff championship. I mean, look, there's not much to mention with this game, because this was just all Georgia all the way. It was 38-7 at the half. I mean, one of the cool things really was in the fourth quarter, it was 52-7, about 2 minutes into, not even 2 minutes into the fourth quarter. And Kirby Smart takes a timeout and pulls Stetson Bennett away, and pulls Stetson Bennett out of the game, basically like a curtain call, to finish up his unbelievable run there at Georgia. And this is tough to do in college football. You know, we talk about all like the great teams, like, you know, like the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, the Georgias of the world, but not many of them repeat as champion. In fact, this is the first time in the college football playoff era that this has happened. This has not happened in general. as a repeat champion since Alabama back in 2011, 2012. But this also speaks to, and look, and there's going to be some ways to talk about this, but this really all starts with, the recruiting angle, because look at how many guys Georgia lost to the NFL draft last year. I think it was 15 guys went to the draft, and including 5 defensive players. And while this Georgia defense wasn't as dominant as last year's, it was still great. And they just ran roughshod all over TCU on Monday night.
Yeah, and I was hoping it would be more of a game, but unfortunately, that just was not quite the case. And instead, I am going to borrow a term that my buddy Noah Dabler uses, and fittingly, I'm using this because he is a diehard Georgia Bulldogs fan.
Absolutely.
TCU got boat raced 65-7. And I stopped watching after that big Brock Bowers play. And by the way, can I just say, Brock Bowers, there is no question in my mind that guy is NFL talent.
Yeah.
Whoever drafts him is going to have an amazing tight end for years to come, barring any injuries.
I agree with you on that. Absolutely. This 58-point win, by the way, largest margin of victory in a bowl game ever. And there really is not much to take out of the game itself, but there's 2 conversations that we can have here in light of this game, Hank. Number one, people are talking about should TCU have even been in this spot? I still say yes, because they still played well enough. I mean, you cannot have, the Alabamas and the Ohio States in every time. I mean, TCU did play well enough. And I'll be honest with you, let's just put it like this. This is not even on TCU. This is just Georgia's just that good. I think Georgia would have blitzkrieged Michigan if Michigan did beat TCU. I think Georgia still would have beat them pretty big. We know that they beat Ohio State to get to the sport, albeit it was very, very close. And I still think Georgia was better than Alabama. I've been telling you that Georgia was the best team. If you've been watching my Monty moments all season long, I told you Georgia was the best team this entire year. So this is really not much of a surprise. I mean, they really had one hiccup, even though they finished undefeated this year. They had one small hiccup this year, and that was against Missouri. They made it pretty close there, but they ended up winning the game. And you know what? When you play 15 games in the college football season, you're going to have a little bit of a minor hiccup. But at the end of the day, this defense is just way too good. Stetson Bennett is an absolute stud. I mean, he finished with 6 total touchdowns in this game, 4 passing, 2 rushing. There's a reason why Georgia is a repeat champion here. And, when you lose that many players to the draft, and you have to replace all those guys. I mean, it just speaks to your recruiting as well. And congratulations to Bennett. Congratulations to Kirby Smart and Georgia on their second straight. But just talking about TCU here, I still believe that they were one of the 4 best teams in the country. Again, they had to beat, it was 5 or 6 ranked opponents just to get into this spot. Max Duggan was great. They just don't have the kind of personnel that Georgia has at the end of the day. So it didn't matter really who was playing in this spot. Georgia was going to win this game, but TCU was one of the 4 best teams. So yes, they did deserve to be in this spot. Number one. Number 2 is the talk of when the college football playoff expands to 12 teams. My concern is, while this was inevitable that it was going to expand, my concern is going to be you're going to have more games in your semifinals and in your matchups, like we saw Monday night, where teams are going to get boat raced. And the term that Noah used, I'm going to use that term right here. That you're going to have more games like Monday night where teams are going to get boat raced. I mean, it just comes down to that. I mean, it's a cool thing. Like let's say this year, if you would have had a Tulane get in, I mean, you don't think you're telling me that Tulane would have had a shot against any one of these teams? And don't give me the adage, any given game, because that just doesn't work in college football. It very rarely does. You know what? Even when you look at Alabama this year and their 2 losses, I mean, they were to a Tennessee team that was very, very good, and Tennessee faded when their quarterback Hendon Hooker tore his ACL. No coincidence there. And then they also had another loss against, I think it was A&M. But Bama struggled this year, and they didn't deserve to be in. Ohio State deserved to be in the top 4. Michigan deserved to be. I mean, Michigan lost because their star running back was out, Blake Corum, and Jim Harbaugh and their coaching staff made some very dumb choices in that semifinal game against TCU. And TCU won because they are very, very talented, but they're just not on the same level that Georgia is. Very, very simple. So if you get to when you get to this 12-team playoff in a couple of years, Hank, you're going to have to brace for the fact that we're going to be talking about more blowout kind of games. And I don't really know if this is best for the sport. I mean, again, I say that as somebody that was for expansion and that was saying that this expansion was inevitable. I mean, I don't know if I would have went to the 12th team, but this 4-team race is, I mean, this is the best they've had. It's better than the BCS was, and this is still the best format of that it could possibly be. So that's what you're going to have to brace for in this spot.
Yeah, that's the tough part. And, I had a bad feeling that this game was going to be bad too, because, you had the 2 exciting games in the previous rounds. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be tough to see the playoffs expanding, because I know that was like one of the last really exciting playoffs was the 4 teams in it format now.
Oh, I agree. And you made an excellent point there. You just came off of 2 semifinal games on New Year's Eve that were both thrilling. And it was going to be hard to live up to that expectation. I mean, when we did this pick on Friday, I thought TCU could at least kept it close because of the way that they are and how they were able to, the way that their roster was. I thought could have actually exploited a weakness in Georgia, but Georgia's just still way too talented. So I thought it was going to be very, very difficult to match the 2 semifinal games, but you make an extra point. You come off of that and you kind of expect that to continue, and it's just not going to happen when you have Georgia as great as they are. So, they're the 4th school since 1990 to win consecutive national titles, and now all the talk will be, we'll see how many guys they lose to the draft this year. I mean, we know that Carter's going, their defensive lineman. Jalen Carter, he's declared for the draft already. So, but those guys go out and you get new guys in, and recruiting has something to do with that. I mean, we saw that with Clemson. Clemson lost Trevor Lawrence and they lost Travis Etienne and they lost some guys, and they brought, and then their replacements just didn't get the job done this year. DJ Uyunglele did not play well this year, and he ended up transferring, and they just don't fill it in. Look at Alabama. Bama loses a bunch of guys, and they still get the job done. I thought this was actually the worst Alabama team that Nick Saban's had, and they still got to.
And they still only had 2 losses.
Yeah, and they got to the Sugar Bowl. I mean, and I do want to say one thing too about this. I know I'm kind of going to go off on a tangent on this spot. I do give Alabama a ton of credit here because Will Anderson and Bryce Young, 2 draft picks, the 2 guys that are going in the NFL draft, did play in their bowl game. You don't see that. Guys that declare for the NFL draft, they very rarely play the bowl game. So I do give them a lot of credit. And Bama, they always find a way. I just think, we'll see where they are next year, because this was their worst team that they had. And there was even talk about, should Bama have gotten in over TCU, which I thought was just absolutely ridiculous. But at the end of the day, the committee got the 4 teams right. We got to our championship. And if anybody's having a problem with TCU being in the spot, then why the hell are we even playing college football then? I mean, we should just have the SEC and the ACC and the Big Ten all play, and nobody else matters. You don't want to give these smaller schools a chance. And you know what? TCU got to this point, and they just lost to the much better team that was superiorly more talented. That's going to happen. So congratulations to Georgia as they repeat as national champions in college football, which is very, very difficult to do no matter what the situation. But yeah, you know what? I mean, the expansion is going to happen, and it seems like everything's expanding. I mean, there was even a report that the NCAA in college basketball wanted to expand the March Madness tournament to 90 teams, which I just think is absolutely ridiculous as well. I mean, it'd be cool. I mean, I love the first 2 weekends of the NCAA tournament, but you're really pushing it to the limit if you're going to go to 90 or 96 teams. I mean, again, why do we even have a college basketball season if you want to have a good majority, if you want to have a fraction of the teams get into the tournament? But yeah, just an unbelievable thing last night. I mean, I know that game was hard to watch, but it also speaks volumes to how great Georgia has been these last 2 years. And you know what? I think it's also showing you that Georgia is the new king in college football. It's not Alabama. It's not Clemson. It's not Ohio State. It's Georgia. And Kirby Smart, who got a huge extension, he deserves every bit of it with what they've been able to do down there in Georgia. So congratulations to the Bulldogs on being repeat champions. Well, switching gears, Hank, let's get a little baseball into the course of the conversation, because as the college football season and the NFL season wind down, you start inching closer and closer to pitchers and catchers reporting. I mean, we're a little over a month away from that happening, if you can believe that. And then you'll start getting very, very close to the season start. And now, look, obviously, when that happens, we're going to start dreading the rule changes and everything. But there are some big storylines with baseball that we have to discuss here. And number one has been a guy that's been in the news off the field as much as he's been on the field the last couple of years, and that's regarding Trevor Bauer. And the Dodgers did officially designate him for assignment after being reinstated following his suspension. And I just think, Hank, when you look at this, I think there's going to be a team. Trevor Bauer will land on some team and probably after his suspension be pitching again, because every team in baseball is starving for pitching, and it doesn't matter. Bauer's going to serve his time and he'll be back. So there will be a team, I think, that'll land him. No?
There probably will be, but that doesn't mean I think that there should be.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. That
doesn't mean that there should be, because you know how I feel about that scumbag.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But there are teams that are desperate for a pitcher. That's the thing. I mean, yeah, maybe you'll take the worst guy in the world, but I would imagine there's going to be somebody that's going to take a flyer on him. I mean, not that it's right, not that I agree with it, but I just think there's going to be somebody that's going to take a shot.
Yeah, again, we'll see. I mean, if he helps said team win a World Series, who knows? But I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think he should go to the Pirates and just pitch that way. I mean, forget about a championship team, just a team that in general that wants to take him on a flyer. And now I don't know if there's going to be a flyer kind of team, if it's going to be like that. I mean, he's still got to get through the rest of this, but there's going to be a team that takes a shot at Bauer for sure. And also one player that's been in the news also a lot this offseason in a different way, in a lighter way, has been Carlos Correa. So originally he signed with the Giants, or at least it looked like it, 13 years. 13 years for $340. Then there was a medical thing that came up, and out of the blue, the Mets ended up picking him up, and they got him like 13. It was 12 for $315 with the Mets. Well, then as you know, when we do this, it was 13 for $350 with the Giants and then 12 for $315 with the Mets. Now, of course, when these contracts are announced, there's always a phrase that I think we sometimes pass over a lot, and that is pending a physical. Well, the Giants originally had concerns with his physical, and out of the blue, then the Mets ended up picking him up, and the Mets now have concerns with Carlos Correa. So this story breaks on Monday night from Dan Hayes and Ken Rosenthal over the Athletic that now the Minnesota Twins, who Correa was with last season, they now are accelerating their talks as the Mets now are remaining in limbo regarding Correa. Now, Hank, I don't know what you think about this, but it's one thing if one team has a concern with him, because, that's going to happen. I mean, you have a concern with his hands. Now, why would you sign for that mega deal? But I digress. But if you now have a second team that has concerns regarding Correa's physical, I mean, that should set off alarm bells. So if the Minnesota Twins want to accelerate these talks and if they want to get him back, if I'm the Mets, I'd let him walk. You know what? I have a good team. I can go out there and get somebody else.
You already have a shortstop too.
Well, they were talking about, I think the Mets were saying that Correa would go play third base if that would happen. I think one of the reasons why they were pushing for him also was Lindor. And maybe you're concerned Lindor gets upset about this, but I mean, you're talking about a guy who's also, I mean, he's 20, if I remember correctly, I think he's 28. And we've seen these contracts in baseball this season be absolutely ridiculous. This offseason have been absolutely ridiculous. But if a second team is going to have concerns regarding his physical, that to me is going to be just nuts. So if the Twins are going to get him, first of all, if the Twins are going to get and want to accelerate the talks and they want to bring him back, first off, I'll tell you right now, it will not be for 12 or 13 years.
Yeah, I would probably agree with letting him go because, I mean, look at the Mets strategy where they're like, buy, and it ain't no lie. See what I did there? And knowing them, I think it's another example of them like trying to spend money, trying to like, become like New York's team, whatnot. And I feel like them signing Correa after like the whole physical thing came out, that was pretty impulsive, no?
Yeah, I think it was a reach for sure.
Yeah, Steve
So
Cohen.
Correa, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I lost my train of thought.
So Correa is 28. He'll be 29 in September.
Mm-hmm.
And you were saying about Steve Cohen.
And he was willing to take that risk despite the fact that he knew that he failed the physical, which I think might have had to do with the metal plate in his leg that from an injury he had years ago. But still, that kind of says something about the way the Mets do business.
Well, I mean, the reports are from The Athletic that the Mets are growing frustrated with the ongoing Correa negotiations. I mean, the length of this now, I mean, it was January. Now we're pushing the middle of January here, and, he's still not signed. And like I said, you've got about a month before pitchers and catchers start reporting. So the Athletic continues to go on here that the Twins kept in touch with Correa's camp even after the 12 years and $315 million agreement that the Mets reached. And their offer prior to his temporary agreement with the Giants in December was 10 years and $285 million. So John Heyman also reported on Sunday that the Mets seem to remain, quote, the most likely landing spot for the star free agent shortstop. And like you said, the club expressed concerns about a right leg and ankle injury that he suffered while in the minor leagues back in 2014. That is the same medical concern reportedly raised by the Giants prior to the Mets deal. So, again, that's two teams now. It's like anything in life. If it happens once, it's one thing. But now if a second team now comes up with concerns, I mean, first of all, if he goes to the Minnesota Twins, I'll bet you right now, and I don't care that he's a Scott Boras client because that'll be another angle to this too. It's not going to be for this. I mean, it's going to be like what the Correa signed for with Minnesota last year. If you remember, his contract last year was 3 years. When he was looking for a huge contract, he ended up taking a 3-year deal with a 1-year opt-out. Could you see something like that happening again where he maybe takes a 1-year deal, bets on himself, and then tries to hit the market again? I don't know if you can do that, though. If you're going to always have concerns with the medical industry, I think you've got to go for one final big contract. But if a second team is going to have concerns with Correa, then that should be setting off concerns for even Minnesota, who had him last year.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, do the Mets desperately need Carlos Correa to take him that much over the top? I mean, they've got a good enough team right now. And I know you still got the Phillies and the Braves in that division. I know that the Marlins are stocking up on young pitching, but they really haven't shown signs of taking the next step. The Nationals are not showing signs of taking the next step. So, I mean, you're there. But I'm trying to think. So and we have to also remember too, this was originally they were saying that a few days even earlier that the Mets were very frustrated with Carlos Correa. So they've been showing signs for a while. So the Mets signed Correa. This deal happened December 21st. So we are now pushing 1, 2. This is almost 3 weeks now since the Mets originally signed Correa, and they're still growing frustrated. I mean, that is fair. I mean, 3 weeks now, and the physical still still a major thing here. What do you think ends up? I'll tell you right now, if I'm the Mets, if the Twins are going to come up with a gigantic offer similar to this, I'd let him go. I mean, if the Giants had concerns and you're having concern as well, if you're getting very frustrated, then you know what? You need to cut your losses here.
Mm-hmm.
Let him go back to Minnesota where you only got to play him a couple of times a year now with the new way that the schedule's made in baseball. It's not like you're going to a division rival here. It's not like you're going to the Braves. It's not like you're going to the Phillies or anything. I mean, you're talking about Minnesota if Minnesota wants to make a move here.
Yeah, I think you just let him walk. You can't really take that risk. And that contract's going to really, really be ugly once he's in his mid to late 30s.
Yeah, it's going to be like that with a lot of teams. I guess, Hank, there'd be one other angle I would take on with the Mets here with Correa. I guess the risk would be you upsetting Lindor. What is Lindor's reaction? Because remember, Lindor was one of the guys who was recruiting to try and get him in, and Correa had said that he would play third base if he was next to Lindor. Would that be a concern that you would have here?
Yeah, I definitely think that would be a concern.
Well, we will find out what happens too. And just a quick Yankee nugget I'll bring in here too. I know we're kind of running short on time, but Brian Sabean, Omar Minaya back with the Yanks in advisory roles. I thought that was pretty cool too. I mean, Brian Sabean used to be with the Yankees. Omar Minaya, we know him from this time with the Mets.
Sabean, I think, was one of the guys that helped scout some of the core four.
Mm-hmm. I thought it's kind of interesting too that they get both of those guys and they just gave Brian Cashman a 4-year extension. I mean, you wonder if you bring those guys in and maybe you're trying to push Cashman out by doing that. I mean, I know they're not. I mean, I think what is it? Sabian's becoming the special advisor to Cashman, and Manaya's coming in as in an ops role. But 2 former GMs there you're bringing in. But then again, you just gave Cashman a 4-year extension.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to have 2 other baseball savvy guys. Although, my feelings about Cashman. Like, I think he's a decent general manager, but I'm still not at the point where I'm fully trustworthy of him.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, you're definitely fair to have. I mean, a lot of Yankee fans have their doubts with Cashman. That's for sure. I mean, I've tried taking the other side in that. I don't think it's really worked, but I mean, they're trying. I feel like they're trying to go in another direction here. When they brought in Benintendi last year at the deadline, and of course he didn't get hurt, and LeMahieu, and of course he's been hurt the last 2 years. But I think they're trying to go in another direction, but it just hasn't really worked out. But it's mid-January. Before you know it, Hank, we'll be talking about pitchers and catchers, and then we'll be having more, let's just say, Gorm moments. I'll just leave it at that. Yep. But Hank, to wrap up the show here, let's talk a quick thing here with the NBA because some significant news broke a couple of days ago regarding, actually just Monday, regarding the Nets all-star forward Kevin Durant. So he's got an MCL sprain, and he's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks, and ESPN's saying that Durant is expected to miss a month. Now, why this is kind of significant is Durant's had MCL sprains before. He had a left MCL sprain in January of last season, and he also had an MCL sprain and a tibial bone bruise back in 2017. Now, the thing with the Nets is, I mean, they're off to a great start this year, but when Durant missed 6 weeks with that left MCL sprain at the beginning of January last season, the Nets had a stretch of 11 straight losses, and they were 5-17 in Durant's absence. So they think Woj is saying that there's confidence that this is a less severe injury than the 6-week one that he had last season, and they think that he won't be out for more than 4 weeks. But when you look at this now, that's going to leave this all the way to Kyrie Irving now. So Kyrie's going to have to be the guy. Ben Simmons is going to have to step up and play a bigger role for the Nets. And when Kyrie's been the sole player playing, this was a great nugget from Evan Roberts on WFAN. The Nets are 14-22 when Kyrie is the sole star. Now, when Kyrie and James Harden were playing together without KD, they were 16-7. So now Kyrie's going to have to be the guy, and Ben Simmons is going to take a bigger role here for the Nets. So this could be kind of a bit of a challenging gap here for the Nets. Now, remember, they got off to a little bit of a slow start before the Steve Nash got fired. But Nets are playing well, and now Durant's going to be out a month. And unfortunately, this is something you expect now with Durant, is that he's going to miss time with an injury. It just happens. But they were playing well, and now they are going to miss somebody who's averaging about 30 points a game. And it's going to be a bigger role here for, they're only a game and a half back for first in the Eastern Conference, the Nets. And I kind of wonder now if they're going to get a reality check here and maybe have a little bit of a tough stretch here coming up without KD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Nets are definitely now in one of their first moments of adversity, but should be interesting to see how they bounce back.
Of course, the other angle you could look at too here is if, Durant misses only 4 weeks and he comes back for the stretch run here for the Nets, it's almost like you're getting a guy at the deadline. Now, remember, the trade deadline in the NBA is February the 9th. And 4 weeks from that is about 4 weeks from now. It would be 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that is 4 weeks from now. So you get Durant back in that time. It's almost like you're making a trade deadline move. And maybe this actually is going to maybe make the Nets get a player come trade deadline time as well.
Yeah.
But so yeah, something to watch here with the Nets as they're only a game and a half out in the Eastern Conference. And kind of a significant injury, although not a serious one, but nevertheless one he's going to be out. He's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks and possibly be out to up to a month. In an NBA that this year, Hank, has just been wild because there's just been so much scoring. I mean, the scoring this year has been absolutely insane. It's insane, to say the least. I mean, there are teams putting up 130, 140 points. In fact, there's only one team in the NBA that has not put up 100 points in a game in 2023, and that's the Phoenix Suns. And, my Knicks are playing well. Of course, they had a bad loss on Monday night where they're up 17 in the third quarter to the Milwaukee Bucks. But they're playing all right. And I can't wait for that trade deadline come February 9th because I think we're going to see our two local teams here make some moves, and we're going to see a lot of maybe movement around in the NBA. I got to end the show on just one final note. I didn't put this in our rundown, but you know how much I'm a game show guy. And you know how much I'm a huge sports guy. Well, on Monday, if you're a huge game show guy like I am, you watch every show, or you at least find out what happens. Well, my former Knicks buddy Jared Jeffries was on The Price is Right on Monday, and made it out of contestants row, got on stage and played a pricing game, and ended up winning a new car. And that's always cool. Hey, look, sports and game shows, they mix well. I always say game shows are a sport. They're like the fifth major. I always equivalent back, and if my friends are watching the show here today, they will tell you that back in 2006, when Deal or No Deal was on, the first run from the end of 2005 through 2009 when I was in high school, we would come into school the next morning and we would break the show down like it was a game show.
Yes.
And then when they had their second run a few years back on CNBC, we had social media at the time, so we were able to break it down on social media as well. And so, just a very cool moment that our former buddy Jared Jeffries, and Jared Jeffries he was a good player. I mean, he was an 11-year NBA veteran. I think they were talking about that he made like $34 million playing professional basketball. So people are like, oh, why does he have to, be a contestant on The Price is Right? Well, there's no rule that he can't be. I mean, and you still have to get out of contest. You still have to get out of, the crowd. You have to get into contestants row, and then you have to get on stage. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. So it's a pretty cool moment. And anytime you get on stage on The Price is Right, you're going to be excited no matter what. So a very special moment. We will actually link that to our Twitter account at Game On ETB, so you can go check out that moment as well. I actually knew about it because of all places, TMZ and the SNY Knicks Twitter account posted that. I had a DVR because I was working Monday morning, so I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I watched it back on Monday night. And yeah, it is the Jared Jeffries. And that's a very cool moment. Again, sports and game shows mixing. Who said that game shows aren't a sport?
They are.
They absolutely are. I mean, we were breaking down the Jeopardy Tournament of Champions last year when you had Amy and Matt DeModio there, and you've already got two big contestants already set up for next year's TOC. So yeah, game shows are a sport. And you know what? When our teams are struggling, that's what we usually had to go to. But fortunately, we have the Giants in the playoffs. We have the Rangers playing well. We have the Knicks and the Nets playing well. We've got baseball right around the corner. So fortunately, we do have teams to talk about in a positive light here. And so we'll find out what happens. But that's going to put a wrap on episode 38 of the show already. Seems like it was just yesterday when we started, but here we are again. So we'll be back later on in the week. Check out our social media accounts. We will give you an exact day and time for our wild card weekend football segment. We're still working on some things there, so we don't have an official thing, but that will be coming out shortly. And of course, folks, you can plenty of ways, make sure to follow us across all of our social media accounts, Facebook and Twitter at GameOnETB, Instagram, GameOn_ETB. Our personal handles there on the bottom of your screen. Our YouTube channel, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when we're going to be on. That's youtube.com/ETB Network. So you can check out all of our shows, not only us, but, Tom and Nick over on Empty the Bench, Nick on Beyond the Bench, Tom also with Zane on MMA Outsiders, and so much more. And of course, our new website is up there at etbpodcast.com. There you can get our new blog that's up and running, and also our show. All of our shows are linked on etbpodcast.com. So check that out. The site is absolutely fantastic. So it's a very, very exciting thing for us. So again, Hank and I will be back later in the week for our football picks. Time and date to be determined. So keep it tuned here for that. And then we'll be back after Super Wildcard Weekend to get you set for Divisional Weekend and look back on Wildcard Weekend as well. So Hank, you have a great week.
Yep, you do the same.
Absolutely. And so for Hank Indictor, I'm Johnny Montalbano. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you later on in the week, and then right back here for episode 39 of Game On next week.